So welcome to the Market Mentors podcast, James.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
It's an absolute pleasure. So before we get stuck into this one, I'd love to know what your relationship is with content marketing for B2B tech brands.
Man, my relationship is a strong one. I got into content accidentally. I was an English graduate, so came out of university with, nil job prospects whatsoever. And kind of was like, okay, maybe I'll do marketing. I'm relatively charismatic. And so I signed on to an internship, and it happened to be one around content. And then somehow my whole degree made sense, and I could write about stuff that people seem to be interested in. I think my relationship to content is just a deep affection and respect for the entire kind of medium. Almost the idea of merit-based marketing is something that I find really, I have a lot of attachment to and really enjoy being a part of. I've never been massively into outbound or kind of sales-oriented kind of marketing or growth aspects. I mean, I do it a little bit, but my heart is very much in merit-based inbound, creating something worthwhile to attract people to your site and creating an immediate positive connotation, understanding of what you're about and what you're at and what you're offering really like resonates with me and always has. So being able to grow businesses through that is really exciting. That's what it's all about for me. And with B2B, it's just, who are we kidding? It's a lot easier to grow through content when you're in B2B space than it is in any other.
Absolutely. And especially as we'll go into a cookie-free environment, I think the power of content is going to be even more so. And, you're obviously in a good space to be in that, really. We're obviously here to talk about sort of the work that you guys have done then for Monday.com. And I'm not sure if you call them Monday.com or Monday or whatever.
Yeah, it's Monday.com. We write Monday.com on everything they ask from Monday.com. It's in all of our, in Slack. It's Monday.com is doing XYZ. Yeah.
Perfect. And for those people that haven't heard of them, I'm sure most people have, but what do they actually do as a business? Just to put a bit of context behind it.
So they define themselves as a work OS. So basically the idea being that they are a platform that allows businesses to coordinate kind of every facet of their business in one place. So project management is kind of the core of what they do and what I understood them to be prior to working with them. But they have expanded quite a lot. They do some CRM stuff. They do some sales funnel, some sales management stuff, task management. But the core of what they do is the coordination of your marketing, projects, sales, systems, essentially. So getting it all onto one place, assigning the right people, moving it through the process, and having total visibility on like every stage of that process, no matter what that process is, essentially. But Work OS is how they would request me to describe it.
And it's a super competitive space because I'm already thinking about 2 or 3 businesses that can do a similar thing. But but these guys are obviously well funded themselves, aren't they? I mean, they've raised a hell of a lot of money. So why did they want to bring and hire Codeless then to help them with their content marketing efforts?
So yes, I mean fundamentally they have around a $12 million marketing budget per month. And a mass majority of that goes towards advertising. You and I were talking about how, Monday.com and the retargeting ads and the non-retargeting ads that we see on every platform in the world. So they came on wanting to do volume. And they had basically been tasked with, the marketing team had been tasked with find a number of different agencies, content agencies that we can use to publish 100 plus pieces of content in every given month. Long form blog content targeting this massive list of topics they'd already identified and prioritized. And they came to us saying, we have this goal of doing 800 in the next 12 months with the majority of them in the first 6 months. How much of that can you take from us? And us being greedy, but also being built to scale, like our processes, Codeless processes are about, we can scale relatively easily. Which is kind of the only way, in my mind, to have a content agency structured. Because if somebody comes and says, hey, we want to give you this content, you need to be able to pivot really quickly and be like, sweet, we're hiring 20 writers, we're training them all, we're getting a new AM, we're getting the systems in place, let's do it. So we said yes to all of it. But the reason that they wanted it, because they knew that they were early stage, but massively funded. They came on in November of 2020 with us. And they knew they needed content to compete. They had every other avenue of growth already kind of fleshed out, and ads came first for them for sure. And so, okay, so let's do some catch up here. So wanted to do a huge amount of volume relatively quickly, and we were able to scale up, match what they were looking to do, bring on. I think we brought on 22 writers, and we ended up doing about 825 pieces in the first 9 months of working with them. So it was, and we're still working with them. We're doing another 60 this month, but like they've kind of slowed down a bit, kind of like hit like a more reasonable kind of cadence. But they wanted to catch up is the long and the short of it. And Codeless kind of answered that call.
Yeah. And at a high level, then, you were talking about the sort of output then. Did they sort of take it down a rung from that and think more about what they were looking for from that output, not necessarily in terms of the number of blogs? Were they talking to you about, okay, well, these are the sort of SERPs we want to be in, these are the sort of keywords we're looking to target?
Yeah. So when they first kind of came on to us, they were doing 4 primary categories of content. And that was like kind of pillar oriented stuff, the most competitive key phrases they wanted to target. They wanted to get that index live, which is, the right idea. They also wanted to do kind of versus content. So, Mondaycom versus every possible competitor who could be even remotely construed to be a competitor of theirs, from Trello to ClickUp to Asana to a random task planner app that you have or whatever. All of those, they wanted to do best of content. Best task planner, best productivity app, best project management tool, best. And they wanted to do support content for the pillars. So again, they run off of, and I kind of worked with them to develop the content strategy around the pillar and post model of content. So we had the pillars that we published in the first the first quarter or 2 quarters, we did pillars, and then the support content came really alongside, because we were doing that level of volume. But normally with non-Monday.com clients, it would come after the fact. And then the verses and the best of pieces, also kind of targeting the primary pillars and then supporting after the fact. So after they got kind of those first 4 categories really fleshed out, we moved on to, okay, what are the what has been released by the product team in the past 9 months that we can now talk about? We want to start ranking for, because they're one of those software companies that just expands into every possible avenue of whatever they think is kind of related to what they do, which is amazing. The product team is remarkable. So publishing new content on new products, and then also going back to optimizations of stuff that was published, 9-10 months ago, and then also like additional support content that was identified. So, but yeah, a little bit of a slowdown. We paused for a bit while they kind of consolidated and made sure of where all their content was, because we did, a lot, and then they had to figure out, okay, where is it all? Is it ranking? Is it not ranking? Have we linked to it at all? So yeah, they did do a 2-month pause while they kind of did an audit, essentially. Of
at least it gave you time to breathe, by the sound of it.
Yeah, for sure. But like our writers were like, what are we doing? I'm like, I'm benching you for 2 months. You need to be on call, though, if and when they come back. Go on holiday.
Brilliant. So once you'd won the project, you talked about sort of building this team then. How did you go about building that team?
The same way you build any team. You put ads out for project management oriented writers, because that was the primary scope of what they were doing. We do a tiered application process. Sorry, a tiered writer categorization. So with pretty much every client, if they're doing significant volume, we have like a basic tier, intermediate tier, and a technical tier. Yeah. Technical writers would do for them at least, they were doing content focused far more on Agile and Scrum and the more complex like PMBOK type advanced project management stuff that I only vaguely touched the edges of. And then we have the intermediate who are doing the bulk of the content. So that was probably about 15 of our writers were categorized as intermediate writers. And then we have the basic who were doing a lot of that versus content, which is relatively formulaic. So we structure our teams that way in general, especially with high volume clients. And we are lucky. We were quite lucky because our managing editor at the time, Jessica, was project manager certified. So she became our senior editor for the account. And she also worked with one of our associate editors. We do a 2-stage editorial process of like, follow the checklist to make sure that the content is branded the way it needs to be and follows the guidelines that they've set out in the writer's guide. And then a final review by Jessica to make sure that everything's factually correct and flows well and stuff. So getting both of those staff members kind of trained up for Monday.com's preferences and how they wanted to sound and what they wanted to talk about and how they wanted to position themselves. And then also making sure the writers had everything they needed to, which was at the time a major part of what my job was. Alongside client strategy, I made sure that our writers and editors had everything they needed from the client, which as anybody, and anybody who knows content or wants to produce great content knows, half the battle is figuring out how you want to sound and what you want to talk about and how you want to position yourself and whether you like M dashes and whether you like cussing and whether you want professional language and all of that stuff. So getting that stuff all up, we use writer's guides essentially, and then actually create checklists within our project management tool that the writers have to tick off. I have made sure that I have included a meta title. I have made sure that I included an image caption. I have made sure that my meta description is less than blah, 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 all that fun stuff. So
you're the process man.
I'm the process. I mean, I was the process man at that time for Monday.com. But that's how you scale. Like you have to have those really concrete processes set in place, because if you try to do it ad hoc, one writer will come in with a piece that looks and sounds completely different. These writers are 3,000 miles away from each other, and the editor is another 5,000 miles away from that. So aligning all of those people onto one team, getting everything delivered on time and looking good is all about strict processing outlines and a lot of calls.
Yeah, I can imagine. So some of these terms are ultra competitive that you were competing for then. If we're thinking about a term itself then, and obviously you mentioned Monday.com sort of competes for lots of different terms, what was the overall content strategy to rank for them? Obviously you've talked a little bit about things like, the pillar and spoke type stuff, but if you were to pick a hard keyword then, how would you approach that? Or how did you approach it when you were working with Monday.com?
So first and foremost, it is the identification of categories for me. I actually start with categories before I start with pillars. Any client, Monday.com is a great example, but any client we have, I start with 3 to 5 categories of content for which you want your brand to show up, period. For them, it was, it doesn't really matter. I won't get into this, like specifics of the categories, but 3 to 5 categories within each pillar, within each category. For them, it was around 10 to 15 pillars. But for the majority of businesses, I would say 3 to 5 pillars for 3 to 5 categories, and then 25 pieces of support content for that category, supporting all the pillars and particularly the ones most relevant to that support piece. And, if you do 3 or 4 categories with 3 to 5 pillars and 25 pieces of content, we're very quickly talking about 100 pieces of content, which is a healthy 2 quarters of work. And that's a content strategy. And then making sure that the pillars go live first, they get indexed first, and supporting them with internal links from all of the future content that you do within the category. Tagging it, having related posts beneath each one within the category itself is, best practice for internal linking. But so that's kind of like the foundation of how any content strategy kind of comes to be. For them, they used a kind of more complicated identification of pillars. They used a kind of a bit of an algorithm that reviewed a number of different things. They did like a personal assessment of intent for each key phrase, alongside a review of the paid search CPCs. For each search term. They also used like a how related is this to our product metric, 1 to 5. And then they kind of used all of these variables, and there's probably 3 or 4 more, and combined it determined which of their pillars were priority.
Yeah.
So project management software, which was like the highest priority piece that we spent a huge amount of time, energy, money on. They are now ranking on the first page for that key phrase, which was a huge accomplishment. It's a very high intent key. No one's typing in project management software unless you're looking for project management software to address your needs. Whereas what is project management is a far different, lower intent key phrase. So saying that, that has a very high cost per click on PPC, it's a very high intent for their platform, it's directly related to what they do and what they want to offer, results in that piece being the priority pillar for the project management category.
And when you're talking about a category, then, are you saying that a category wouldn't be project management software then?
No, the category might be project management, period.
Yeah, okay.
And project management software, project management tools, project management planner, all of those are distinct key phrases that they would target within that category.
Fine. And you talked about sort of building a pillar page first then, rather than building the blogs and then building the pillar page. Why would you do it that way then? Because you read stuff and you get different ideas. I've read stuff which actually says you create the blogs, then you create the pillar page after that. Why would you do it the way that you did it then?
Two primary reasons. Firstly, you want to get your pillar pieces, your pillar URLs indexed as soon as possible, because Google says they reward recency, and they do to an extent, but there's a whole lot of mediocre content from 2018 on high domain authority sites that are ranking on the first page of Google still. And the content's outdated and it hasn't been updated, but it has backlinks, it has referring domains, and the domain authority is strong, and those articles are still there. And very little some of us can do to kick them off, simply because they have accumulated the highest number of the variables that Google rewards with their algorithm. So we get our indexed, we get our pillars up first. They get indexed. They start building their links organically. They start building a little bit of momentum on their own. And then when you support them, also just from a writer's perspective, having live URLs that they can link to within their content saves you from having to go back to every single piece you wrote and add in internal links to your pillar pieces. So that's just an easier process wise. For me as well, I also like to throw pillars against the wall. Actually, I like to throw categories against the wall and see which ones stick. Because, for instance, we have another client called Earlybird. They do like financial gifting app. And when they came on, they had no domain authority, way less budget than Mondaycom did. But we did a similar kind of categorization structure. Financial literacy was one of their categories. Another was like financial gifting was one of their categories. The UTMA style like savings plans and stuff was another one of the categories, and student loans or student aid or something. I didn't know which one of those categories was going to work best. So we created content for all of them. The pillars went live first, and they supported content went live. In the first 3 months, it just so happened that the gifting category stuck. No idea why. Like I've been an SEO for 13 years, and I couldn't tell you why that category stuck in that one and the other one didn't. But the fact is that it did. So if I publish content within each category, throw it at the wall of Google and see which one sticks, then I know what I can double down on in Q2 and Q3 and Q4 based on what is performing from Q1. And so I get those pillars all live. And then if I want to support one of them in particular, heavier investment in Q2, 3, and 4, I can do that and make that decision after the fact. So it just makes more sense to me that way. And that's what I've seen work.
And is it always 3 months you've got to wait for something to be indexed? Is that the sort of rough time you tend to sort of suggest to see how something's performing then?
I mean, it'll be indexed in a week or two. Google will crawl your site and see the URL. But I would say 3 months. It depends if you have a backlinking strategy. If you're using like a backlink agency that knows what they're doing and is like driving high domain authority backlinks to your site, things can move a lot more quickly. But if you don't, I would say 3 months or so. Yeah, before you can see like statistically significant analytics on any given category performing or outperforming any other.
Perfect. So if we drop it down a notch and sort of talk about this execution then, I mean, how do you sort of structure each blog or each piece, you're talking about pillar pages or blogs, of that content then to make sure it's optimized for the keywords that you're targeting? So
it's a number of things. And interestingly, very few of them are actually SEO experience of the writers or editors. There are a number of tools that are doing a fantastic job of reviewing the existing SERP for a targeted key phrase and telling you what those articles and those URLs feature, what the semantic key phrases are, the word count, what other variables are working on those sites or on those URLs that your draft of content may not necessarily include. And you can use those tools, Market Muse, Phrase, ClearScope, SEO Surfer. Yeah. You can use those kind of in two stages. The first being when I drop in the key phrase project management software into one of these tools, it'll tell me the average word count for the ranking top 20 search results, as well as what the semantic and secondary key phrases are that those articles are including. And I can also, if I want to, populate a content outline with being inspired by the ranking content. So project management software, every ranking URL includes mention of productivity. Every single one includes mention of hybrid and remote workspaces. Every single one includes whatever. And that doesn't mean that I write exclusively formulaic or content that just copies the existing content, but it does mean that I make sure that what I'm including in my draft is as comprehensive as what's out there. So, and I urge our writers, I make very, very clear to our writers that you can use these outlines, you will be inspired by these outlines, but if you do not bring something new to the table, we have a whole problem. Because ultimately, if you just regurgitate what's already ranking, you're going to not rank, because the URLs that are ranking are by definition have more free domains and more backlinks, et cetera, and you won't. Yeah. So that's kind of the first stage. And the second stage is once you've completed your draft, you can see how it's performing against those ranking URLs and see, it'll give you a content score saying that you are, under, here are the semantic key phrases that you're missing, include them. So that's kind of like the foundation for the writers. We also, of course, follow every SEO best practice, since May, June with the page experience algorithm, which was a major change for the SEO space. There's a higher emphasis for sure on image compression, little to no, as little as we can get JavaScript and CSS in the back end of the site, making sure that the page experience is good, white space, reducing bounce rates, trying to increase time on page, making sure there's no pop-ups on mobile. All of those kind of factors are more and more important as we kind of get into 2022 and 2023. So we do all of that stuff as well. Meta title, meta descriptions, headers, all of the fun stuff that you do. But it's all predicated on making sure that the content itself is as good and includes as much. It includes everything the ranking content does. And then we add a bit of, that extra zhuzh, that extra thought leadership, personality. And then, of course, the Monday.com voice and the Monday.com product in some capacity.
And that zhuzh then, does it just tend to be more copy related then, or are you sort of focusing a bit more on design? I mean, I'm sort of listening to a lot of people who are talking about, the mix of mediums on a blog post. So you've got the blog itself, but you might have a video to explain the blog. When you're talking about that kind of zhuzh then, what is that?
It's the stuff that when you look at the SERP, you look at every single article, you say, why does this one stand out when these ones don't? So the zhuzh could be anything. Zhuzh can be white space. Zhuzh can be when you get on a page, the font choice just is good and seems clean and aligns with what you think of when you think of a modern business. But zhuzh can absolutely also be video, within reason. No video is better than bad video. So make sure that is front of your mind. If you want, everybody, make video. No, make good video. Otherwise don't make video, because bad video is going to increase bounce rates higher than anything else you can possibly imagine. If you have a video at the top of your site or top of your blog article that looks bad, that's the end of it, because that's respect for your site and trust for your site and credibility. But good video, absolutely. Custom images, investing in images, 100%. Though then compress them and make sure that they're not massive, because otherwise you have 2.5 megabyte custom images with lovely little animated people, and your site, your page experience also goes.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, yeah, I mean, the zhuzh is that little extra je ne sais quoi that when you come to a site or a page, you say, yeah, this is a company that looks like they know what they're doing. And it's as subconscious as it is anything else. You know what a good site looks like.
Yeah, I like how you talk about it, because you're kind of almost blending the science of it with the creativity. There is a science to it, isn't there? Really, we've obviously got some, sort of headline figures on the podcast title itself. But I mean, how did you guys get on there? What kind of difference did you make then for Monday.com, apart from the sort of massive output that you produced?
Yes, so I mean, it was a monumental achievement, and there were a lot of people involved in it. Since November of 2020, we published over 1,000 articles for them. They are seeing, I can't share traffic numbers, but I can share Ahrefs data. I can share my side of it. They're seeing about 35,000 keywords they weren't seeing before, keyword rankings, including 2,000 odd first page, top 3 actually, ranking positions for the content we produced, which, some of the key phrases we're talking about, like not every, first to third ranking position they have has significant volume, but a lot of them do. And when you're, between first and third position for a key phrase that has 20,000 search volume per month, we can assume there's significant traffic there. And I think that's a fair assumption. Their domain authority, which to be fair was 82 when we got them, is now 84. I think there's diminishing returns with domain authority, but their ad budget has not decreased. That is for sure. So I think they're probably seeing some good bottom line changing stuff from us as well. But we're really happy with them, and they seem to be happy enough with us as well.
And would they talk to you about sort of content that relates to sort of stuff going in the funnel then, or would you not get too involved in that? Would they talk to you about, okay, well, these are the pages that are actually translating into people taking a trial and then paying us? Would you get into that kind of stuff, or is it more about sort of building that authority, the keywords and traffic into the site in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, our primary function is the creation of high quality content. I do tend to advise every client on turning traffic into leads and sales. With Monday.com, because their marketing team is as large as it is and as disparate as it is, I don't have a huge amount of insight into the sales funnel from that. But I'm sure it's great.
So what about tools then? I mean, we talked about a few tools there, haven't we? For anybody that's in content marketing listening to this then, what kind of tools do you recommend them to use?
All right, get your pens and paper out. So it all starts with Ahrefs, SEMrush, or Moz. Those tools allow you to, once you've identified your categories, those tools allow you to determine which content pillars make the most sense to target. You can see search volume and get your own assessment of intent behind each one. Then you can see support content. The easiest way to do that, by the way, a little hack, find a competitor, see what they're ranking for, copy their planning sheet over, their ranking position sheet over, and remove stuff that's irrelevant to you, and then do it better. So that's the secret behind. There's a lot more than that, but yeah. So once you have those tools in place, the writing part of it, we use Google Docs exclusively because it allows you to share and comment and have multiple people responsible for different stages of the content production process. The writers all use Phrase currently, though we've used ClearScope in the past and Market Muse before that, all of which are great tools. We didn't leave because they were bad. We left for other reasons. Those tools allow them to inspired by or inform their content outline. We do an outline review process from the editors, make sure that and the clients, make sure that everything is in line and looks like it's going to be good. We manage the delivery of those outlines and the drafts via really whatever the client wants, but everything is coordinated within ClickUp, which is a Monday.com competitor, but shush. Though, you can use, if you're smaller, you can use Trello, Asana, Notion, whatever. There's a lot of project management tools out there that are really good, and content management or content planning works just as well within any of them. The stages of content planning and content production aren't so complicated that you need a super advanced tool. But yeah, so we use ClickUp to deliver that kind of the outlines. Then it goes back to the writer to draft, and they use, once they've drafted, they check their content against the competition within Phrase or one of the other tools. They check it within writer.com. We have, so writer.com is kind of a Grammarly competitor, but it allows you to do brand specific guidelines within the tool itself. So it can check whether the you know how Hemingway app has their like readability score. Writer.com takes that up a notch to allow you to say like, you know, don't use contractions, do use contractions, don't use cuss words, do use cuss words, don't use em dashes, use semicolons. All of that stuff, which is client specific or brand specific, if you're in-house, is done within writer.com. Then it also goes to AutoCrit. AutoCrit is a plagiarism checker tool, and the writers are required to like record the AutoCrit score to make sure that nothing they have in their piece is more than 1% plagiarized, which is basically nil. Because we don't mess with plagiarism and no one should. It's like a zero tolerance for any of our writers. You do it once, you're gone. Then the editorial team uses Grammarly to check kind of just flow and make sure that once they've edited it manually, that they haven't missed anything from human error. And then we use Loom to kind of showcase like, here's what we're thinking for next month's content plan. We use Loom for reporting as well, alongside Ahrefs. And then Zoom to talk to you. That's probably most of my stack right there.
And how do you track the SERPs going forward then? Do you use Ahrefs then to keep an eye on how you perform?
I use Ahrefs across the board. I mean, their tracked keywords tool is great, but the problem with tracking keywords is that if you create a content piece, like, and maybe it's a support piece, and the primary target for it is project management tools, and then it ranks for project management software, which is a higher volume key phrase, Ahrefs keyword tracker isn't going to tell you that. So I actually use a site explorer, which is domain. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have an inventory to check the ranking positions of all of the content that we produce. I use that and care about that, not just to report on performance to clients, but also to be very aware of our optimization opportunities. So if a URL has plateaued in 11th position for a high volume key phrase, I want to know as soon as that plateau is like kicked in, which is about three to 4 weeks of like up and down on like an 11th or 12th position, then I want to know as soon as possible so that I can do whatever I need to tweak the content, update the content, add word count, add images, whatever I need to, add links to move it to the first page. And those are often a better use of my time and my team's time than creating net new content. We would optimize what's already there.
Well, you're basically close. You're at the top of page 2, aren't you? So if you're at the top of page 2, then you can just nudge it up to page 1. It makes a big difference. And does Phrase give you? I guess Phrase gives you like a writing score, then, does it? So do you look for a minimum score out of 100 then?
Yeah, Phrase uses kind of a weird scoring system, but ultimately any of the tools is going to give you a blank out of the target, the average content score for ranking content. ClearScopes is a A to F. Marketing Muses is a out of 100, and Phrases is like out of the average essentially. But all of our content is required to be at or above. No, all of our content is required to be above the target score before delivery.
Perfect. Okay, great stuff. What about, I mean, you obviously look at a lot of businesses and their content strategy then. Where do you think most B2B companies get it wrong?
They either don't invest enough or they invest too much. Finding the balance between creating content that Google will like, but not investing so much that when nothing happens with it, no matter what, you haven't spent $5,000 on a piece of content. It's an interesting line to walk. It's a challenging one. I would recommend listeners and everybody within the content space to consider the creation of great content always, but not amazing content until you have traffic. Okay. Do not be afraid to update and optimize content after the fact. Great content will get to the second page of Google. Once it's there, if it gets there, increase internal links to it, put some energy towards backlinking from external sources, optimize the content, update the content, add word count, whatever you need to do. But don't necessarily, don't throw everything you have at every single piece of content, because you're going to wear yourself out. You're going to wear your writers out. And then when you don't get the results you want, you're going to say, oh, the ROI on content marketing doesn't work for us. And you're going to bail. And that is the wrong conclusion to come to. The right conclusion is, let's publish high volume of really good content, see which of those pieces, which of those categories, which of those pillars kind of clicks with Google, and then double down on it after the fact. Optimization is actually the key to content success, not the creation of great content.
I think it's a great point, actually. Now, I think I've read that in, is it Think SEO? Is it the... I think there's an SEO community, actually.
No, Matt, that is an original thought, and no one has ever said it before. I am a thought leader.
Brilliant. I like it. But yeah, I think a lot of people do generally think that they've got to produce this amazing picture. You know, if you're thinking about painting a picture, it has to be absolutely spot on before they release it into the open. But actually just seeing how that performs and then adding to it and building to it over time. Makes total sense, doesn't it, really? If we've got marketing directors, CMOs, people who are responsible for content marketing, why should they hire an agency? Why should they keep it in-house? What are the sort of differences between those two decisions, really?
It's a good question. The first one is the simple kind of like cheesy. Content agencies do it for a living, and they do it for a number of different clients. So they know what works for every vertical that they mess around with. And not every, we don't really mess too much around with e-commerce, because it's harder to stick for us, and performance is half of retention. So knowing what's going to work for your business isn't a given, no matter who you hire. The other component of it is that agencies do it for a living. That is all they do. I am a content strategist. I don't do ads, really. I don't do email marketing campaigns anymore. I don't really even do lead gen. I do content. I do it really well, which is kind of the same idea of like, if I'm going to get an electrician, if I need my house rewired, I'm going to hire an electrician rather than like a general contractor who like may or may not electrocute himself. Specialism is not a bad thing. In fact, it's like the best case. The best possibility of success is somebody who does this for a living specifically this. The other component of it is that we can do higher volume than your in-house teams can. And the quantity quality conversation within content has always been an interesting one for me. I'm leaning more towards quantity now, genuinely. And that's based on my throw against the wall and see what sticks methodology and ethos. So long as the quality is like good and strong, after the fact, you can optimize it. So we create great content. We create way better than good content, but we can create high volumes of content. Like not every in-house team, and this is the reason that Mondaycom came to us. They have a massive marketing budget, but they couldn't get the 25 writers in October that they needed to produce 100 pieces of content in November. So going with the content agency allows you to outsource the content strategy to people who know exactly what they're talking about, and to outsource the existing processes so you don't have to build them up from scratch and develop your project management tools and develop the systems in place. You don't have to bring in the editors and train them on everything you're looking for them to do. And you don't have to bring in the writers who are unlikely to be able to match the cadence that an agency is able to match. So a number of reasons, not all of which are because I'm biased.
And when you say you're sort of leaning towards volume, then if I said to you something like programmatic SEO, then is that something that you think is a sensible play then for companies, or would you think that's just too much on the sort of high volume, low quality side?
It's too much. It's a line, man. I mean, quantity and quality has always been a line. It's never been like exclusively to quality or exclusively to quantity. And I would say that you're getting, no. It's the same as AI generated content. Like there's going to come a time when we're going to look into that and think about it. And we already are. And I've had a couple of conversations with people about it. luckily for all of our 75 writers, it's not there yet. The software's not there yet. But there may come a time when you can plug in 150 key phrases into a tool, hit go, and you're going to get 150 2,000 word articles back. I would urge people not to do that. Genuinely, because Google is getting really, really good at identifying the difference between programmatic, formulaic, regurgitative content and thought leadership that provides a unique angle, a unique take, and true value to a subject. And they're getting better and better and better at that, which is a challenge for some of our writers, because they want to just kind of do the same piece that somebody else has. But that's a huge part of what I spend my days doing, is fighting that instinct in writers. That's why I recommend you develop a foundational process and system that disallows subpar content from coming through to you. The way that you do that is by creating checklists, by adding tools that are required to be reviewed and completed against, so that every piece that comes through to our editors, we know is at or above the content score compared to the competition. Every single article that comes through to us, we know has no plagiarism whatsoever in it. We know that there are no grammatical errors because they've checked it within writer.com or within Grammarly. And then the senior reviewer knows that their editorial assistant has checked all of those checklist pieces off and all the brand specific stuff. So that as soon as the person who you pay a bunch of money is reviewing this content, they only have to spend 10 minutes on it instead of 40. So all that stuff together creates a foundation of quality content that can be then done at scale, because you put the onus on the writers, who aren't necessarily as expensive as the senior reviewers and the editors and stuff. You put the onus on them, you add tools, and then you create a foundational standard of quality. And then you can do 800 pieces in 6 months.
And where do you go to keep your skills sharp?
I talk to a lot of people. I used to be way more active within like the communities and stuff. But I have since kind of winnowed it down. You know how like people always talk about like the best thing to do as an entrepreneur is to find a mentor and just follow them around. And there's validity to that. So for me, luckily enough, like two of the guys that I work with, Brad and Jeremy, we just all talk a lot about stuff. Each person, it's all about reading stuff and hearing stuff and then communicating it to other like-minded people who know what they're talking about it and synergizing the meaning behind all this stuff. So if you have a core group of like 3 or 4 other people who you trust and respect and believe that they know what they're doing, they help you know what you're doing. So I would recommend people try to create, don't necessarily like, you don't have to read all day long. Get the people who you trust and read them, and then talk to other people you trust about it and see what they think and they're saying. So for me, that's myself and Jeremy and Brad and Jen as well. One of my other kind of within my network, all experts in the space and people who, once we combine forces, we're a thing to be reckoned with.
Superb. So final question then, if you were hiring a content marketing manager, B2B we're talking here then, what would you look for? What sort of skills and attributes would you look for?
Firstly, they should be a English graduate from University of Victoria in 2010. I mean, there is something there though. I would say that I wouldn't go exclusively to a business graduate. I think that content is one of those spaces that walks the line between creativity and marketing, creativity and sales. And walking that line intelligently and well is a core component of it. So I would find the person who is charismatic in and of themselves, because more and more frequently, being a content manager is about clarity of thought with your writers and editors. It's about client side or being able to communicate with your product team and your sales team and your head of whatever, to communicate the value of the things you're doing, to present thoughts coherently and consistently. And also somebody with an organized mind. So somebody with a background in project management is just as valid as somebody with a background in marketing. A lot of, like what I'm recommending across the board is a very systematic and process-driven content strategy. because that creates quality content, even if that quality content comes out with like personality and flair and the joie de vivre. Well, that's the wrong French one. But you know, that level of flavor, the je ne sais quoi, it could come out with flavor, but it comes from a place of high process. So somebody who can coordinate that is just as key as somebody who like has a really strong fundamental understanding of the marketing funnel, the sales funnel, etc. You can train or request that they get super smart with lead generation best practices and site optimization and all the rest of it. What is more difficult to train is an organized mind and a charismatic personality, both of which are just as important to me. I also would urge people to consider the things that you can train and the things that you can't whenever they're hiring anybody. And the content marketing manager is no different. They should have an excellent written and verbal communication. They should be an editor in their own right. They should know what good content looks like. So they should have a background in writing on some level, because unless your content manager knows what good looks like, you'll produce bad. But don't focus only on people who have a marketing background or even exclusively writers. Focus more on the personality of the person and how they communicate and the base intelligence, because there are so many fantastic training programs out there and courses and stuff that you can push them into, that a lot of the rest of it can be taught.
Hire the attitude and train the skills. Yeah. Well, look, this has been fascinating. I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's been amazing just to hear the work that you guys did for Monday.com. Truly phenomenal, really. And it's actually interesting hearing how you sort of formalize things and structure things. And you talk very much about that process, as well as obviously the creativity needed to sort of bring great content to market. And of course, the bar for great content is just getting higher and higher. So it's been fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much for giving up your time.
Absolutely, man. I really enjoyed this. Let's do it again sometime, Matt. Thank you.
Perfect. Cheers.